Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So on stream last night, we were getting a bit creative, and I took it as a bit of a challenge to maybe see if we could do something that sort of looked impossible. But anyway, a couple of things with this. We theory crafted a behemoth build. Now, someone might be, well, why is that significant? Why is that, well, it's not significant, but why is that, cool? Well, number one, it's because of this rampage node. Now, this is not the best node, right? So we get a 10% increased character size, which is cool. But your spells are disabled and spell skills deal no damage. This is quite the issue. Yeah, so anyway, we actually made a build with this. And funnily enough, we made a build using Final Blow as well. So we're going to run through a Facebreaker, Vaal Ground Slam, Gruthkul's Pelt, Behemoth, because why not? It's sitting at about 17 million DPS, and it's incredibly tanky. And quite frankly, I'm probably going to play this build later in the league once I get a bit of currency up, because it just looks way too fun to not play. Anyway, let's get into the video and talk about the POBing and the theory crafting behind this. Okay, so a few things that we need to understand about how this sort of build interacts, right? Which we had to understand when we were building it, right? Is number one of the biggest challenges with the build is the spell. You have no spells. Basically, all auras, Immortal Call, basically everything that is a defensive skill operates as a spell. So essentially, with this build, you are an exposed nerve. So unless you know what you're doing, right? So block is pretty much the best defense strategy that we have, and also stacking a ton of life regeneration, which is really, really easy to do with Gruthkul's Pelt. That definitely helped a hell of a lot too. So basically, and we can bring that up on screen. So this is Gruthkul's Pelt, right? So how this works, 100% increased global physical damage. We get a ton of extra life. We get a big amount of armor and evasion, and 10% life regenerated per second. And also 15% character size increase. By the way, this has a 25% increased character size, so you're going to look like a giant on the screen when you play it, which is going to be pretty funny. So there are defenses baked into us. It's not ideal, but it sort of compensates for things like pride and all those sorts of juicy things. Definitely like vitality is compensated for. That sort of makes things easier. Now, why did we go the route of Facebreaker? We'll just bring this up. So number one, we don't really worry about your crit strike chances lucky while on low life. Like if that happens, essentially you're going to get more damage. Arguably, in fact, sort of thinking on this, we don't even need this final blow node. We could totally go with a different node. For example, Dire Rampart. Actually, thinking about this now, that would be a better node to go. 1 second, let's just recraft the tree. Okay, scratch that. We do need Final Blow. We 100% need Final Blow. Okay, so basically, understanding how this scales damage is one of the other elements that we need to get our head around. So number one, Facebreaker is notoriously good for scaling damage on. And the reason being is 800% more physical damage when with unarmed melee attacks, right? Now, that basically means we don't have to rely on a weapon to be able to scale melee physical damage. And also, it doesn't really lend itself to, like, the percentages are so high in this case that we don't need to worry about, like, having things like pride or, like, auras and stuff like that to scale damage. Just natively does that. Now, this multiplies by the damage modifiers from rage. And that's why this is really important to understand next. So we go up into sheer fury. Right, 15% chance that you would gain rage on hit. When you gain rage on hit, you would instead hit maximum rage, and you get a modifier of plus 15%. All right, so then basically we go fueled by hate. We have 50% increased rage cost of skills. That's fine, because with this build we're stacking, I think about 60. I think it was about 68 rage, but we'll go into the POB actually after. Where is it? Rage, 61 rage. Okay, so we have like a good probability of like hitting at least 3 times when we have like max rage up, and we're gonna have a high probability of max rage, so that's pretty good. And then basically Vaal attack skills, you use your self-cost rage instead of requiring souls. You cannot gain rage during soul gain prevention. This is the biggest issue, and we use things like Atsiri's Rain to get this down, and potentially like Soul Ripper or something like that could also be a big assist with this. But this is the only thing that we really need to play around with. how do we get our soul gain prevention down so we can cast this enough. It's not a massive issue being like a big slam build where you can like wipe whole screens. So I don't expect the clear speed of this to be insane, but then again, if we can scale damage and ramp damage up efficiently, then potentially this could be really, really cool. But basically, yeah, so we're going to abuse this node, and this node is actually Hateforge. So basically, we're running a Hateforge build without a Hateforge. Now, Hateforge would be better, except for the fact that, well, even then it's not really better because 30 rage doesn't really do anything. But essentially, yeah, this is Hateforge. Now, the biggest issue is it's inverted. So it's Hateforge is reduced rage cost of skills, and this is increased cost. So yeah, that's basically the only disadvantage of this node. It goes the opposite way in that direction. But if we can stack enough rage, then we get a lot of advantages from that. And also, if we stack enough rage as well, then basically we do big damage and we can get a lot of other things like extra armor, movement, speed, intimidate, and all that sort of stuff from it. So that's basically the gist behind the build. So we stack rage with a high probability of getting max rage consistently. We use a Vaal slam skill and we scale our damage up, being a slam quite easily with Facebreakers, because Facebreakers is relatively easy to scale if you know how to play a Facebreaker build, and I fortunately do. Now, we have no spells in our setup as well, and we're going to take advantage of block skills where we can, or retaliation skills, because that sort of seems to be the going rate of how to scale this. Now, if you were going to play on Vaal rage skills, right, you could still rage stack, and then you could play like retaliation skills and still run Gruthkuls. There's other ways to run this setup without having to use a Vaal skill. So you could still make it quite powerful, and honestly, like, you could still run this as a sort of armor stacker if you could figure out how to get around some of the challenges with the build, or potentially a fortification stacker, and you could run with a totally different setup with a high DPS weapon. That would probably work as well. There is a way to do this with mana stack or strength stack, but I have absolutely no idea how to do that at this stage. Someone smarter than me will probably figure that out. But basically, you could reuse the setup and then run like a mana stacking setup, and potentially that could work as well. But this is a route that we're going to take. So anyway, let's get into the POB. We've just got our editing software there. Okay. So basically, this is what the POB looks like. We'll just clear this. We were searching for rage. It's not like a non-conventional tree, but we've had to make some compensations. Now, currently I have 159,000 hit pool. Which isn't too bad, but it is buffed up by the fact that we have 80-80 spell block and attack block. By the way, I'll reiterate, this is not a league starter build. Do not play this league starter. You need gear and patience and a lot of just a lot of tough iron will to get through this one. But if you can do that, then it's probably going to be quite fruitful. Now, I have this at 17 mil. There is a distorter in here, which is frenzy charges, which we do like this weird shit where we use glacial swipes, which is a retaliation skill. We use ice bite to generate our frenzy charges from killing frozen enemies, and we use culling strike and expert retaliation to sustain that, to keep them up. Now, the only other thing that we want to do that is try and find a way that we have longer charge uptime, but that's something that we'll just have to tease out in the build. For now, this is basically how I've gotten around and made this work. But basically, yeah, this is the tree. So essentially how this works is we're using Vaal, right? We get max block up with Vaal. We don't care about elemental spells because we can't use it. We need it for the block, right? We use Abyssus, and these are like, you know, corrupted items. It's actually not that expensive of a build to get up if you were going to choose to get it up. But anyway, essentially we need the Abyssus because we need the flat physical damage. The big downside is the physical damage increase taken. That's why we have no physical max hit. So basically, we are at the mercy of block. But that being said, when we have our Enduring Cry up, we have 1,408 life regeneration per second. So we regenerate a lot of HP on this build. And if you can get the life pool up to about 6,000 to 7,000, you're laughing, essentially. You should be able to do pretty well. The other big advantage of Abyssus is just the straight melee crit that we get 113%. We have 505 crit multi, right? And we have 95.2% crit. If we can find a way to get that up further, then we'll be a lot more powerful. And arguably there is a way to do this, but we'd have to compromise defense, and we'll talk about that soon. So then we have Gruthkul's Pelt, right? We use +2 to AoE skill gems, and that just gets our gem level up, so we do more damage. But there's no contradiction of stats here because this synergizes with the node that we're using from the Behemoth Ascendancy, which is what was it, blah, 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 Rampager, right? So also added to this, we get Rampage as well. So we get like a buff from Rampage for clearing and stuff like that. So that's also an advantage that comes with this. We're going to do like big screen hits, clear, and yeah, line up slam after slam with Vaal slams, and also it'll look really cool with Vaal slams as well. But basically, yeah, that's the chess piece that we're going to run with, right? So we get to face breakers. 800% rolls aren't that expensive, and we have an implicit for 9% increased attack speed. Now, what I don't know, and there are mixed things I'm hearing, is essentially you could potentially get vulnerability to work on hit. I don't know yet, though, if that will work. That could be a glitch. It could be legitimate. I have no idea. Maybe it counts as an on-hit curse and not a spell. I'm not sure. If you could get vulnerability on the build, it would be drastically more powerful. So it's just something that we'll have to play around. The other thing could be we run like a replica Witchfire Brew as well. Now, we have a lot of stuff in here, but if we ran a replica Witchfire Brew, we could get the advantage of that. Actually, we could sort of replicate that now. Replica Witchfire Brew. Yeah, so we get like 4.4 million DPS if we can do that, and that actually sticks. And that could also be a way around doing this. It gives us evasion rating. It's not really an advantage from a defense standpoint, but we could get around the whole problem with curses. With spells that this build currently has. But also talking down this, obviously because it's a Facebreaker build, we have to run Ridgewald's Curse, and we basically scale claw modifiers with our unarmed modifiers, and it gives us tons of damage. This is the BIS, a BIS amulet, right? You're not going to get any better than this for a Facebreaker build. You need it. It's basically the biggest chunk of your damage that you output. Now, steel rings, yep, and we would probably use a Calandra's Touch and replicate the other ring. That is probably the best way to go about this. This ring is really, 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 this is like a Warlord ring. This would be really hard to craft. So I don't yet know how we would make this work, but we'd just get something close to it. Probably have to drop the crit multi off. You need the Chaos Res on the build. Get more Chaos Res, you probably get up to about 200k effective hit pool. So if we could get life on this, even better. We'd probably get rid of the life recoup. We don't necessarily need that. It's just nice to have. And also the leech as well. We don't need the mana leech because we're running blood magic as well. So we don't need to worry about mana leech either. We just spend skills because we got 1400 life regeneration per second anyway, so it's irrelevant. Next we got Wraeclast. I played around with Bear's Girdle. Bear's Girdle with the extra 10 rage just doesn't cut it. So Wraeclast with the total maximum fizz damage and also the obvious min-max element to it is just way more powerful in every possible way. We got like Bottle Faith, Ruby Sapphire and Topaz Flask definitely helps a hell of a lot, and Amethyst Flask as well. Now there is like an argument we could get rid of Bear's Girdle, not Bear's Girdle, Gruthkul's Pelt, but we take away a lot of our damage as well, 3.2 million DPS. We could use something like Fourth Vaal, but then Fourth Vaal is tedious to get working with this because, again, no spells. So armor is really not that relevant. We have to rely on block, flat life regeneration, and a little bit of armor to take the edge off. Can we replace out Abyssus? Not easily, because Abyssus is just, it is Abyssus. It is what it is. This is one of those cases where we would just have to trial and error the build to figure out how to get it all to work. Now, we don't have any, any Vaal skill like Flask or anything like Soul Ripper or stuff like that. This is all stuff we would need to test out, and if you want to see a video of how to get those flasks, because they can be farmed, then we could probably try and do some Vaal Temple and run through that. Now, at Series Rain we have in the build, which we never use in any other build, but it works in these builds now. Vaal Skill Gems have 18% chance to regain consumed souls when used, which could also mean Rage, possibly. And 18% increased Vaal skill effect duration. I'm not sure what that means for Vaal Slam, but we'll see what happens anyway. But that's the basic gist behind the build. It's not the most complicated gearing build. It was just tedious to try and figure out how to get the tree to work. But it does sort of work, and that's the beauty of it. It's like the stupidest thing in the world, But anyway, yeah, it does sort of work. All right, so anyway, let's talk about the config screen where everything comes from next, and then go through the standard gear skills and all the rest of it. Okay, so first of all, Soul of Brian King, Soul of Tukahama. If we did have like Lunaris or something like that, we would get more damage reduction. Nearby enemies, 10. We get 142. It's probably a bigger benefit to run Lunaris, to be honest with you. We'll find another way to get stun immunity, probably Flass. And then time spent station where you have set to 5, but we could just set that to like nothing and it wouldn't affect the build in any significant way, shape, or form. I don't believe we're running Nature's Patience in this. We could add Nature's Patience into this build. By the way, this is a level 100 tree, so the solution around that would just be to drop off like these nodes here or something like that. Pretty much, or maybe even that. Probably not that. You'd have to drop off some life or some damage or something else, or maybe these crit nodes, to be honest with you, and you'd have to drop it down a little more. So, yeah, probably that mob mentality and whatnot. Or basics of pain, and we'd have to drop it down by, no, not that much. Yeah, mob mentality and whatnot, we'd need to drop those off to be able to sort of get it down to level 95 or so. So just get rid of one of the medium clusters if you're worried about that. But anyway, so basically we're not on low life. If we were, we'd have more crit, but it becomes irrelevant when you get to this much crit. Frenzy charges, we're sort of saying that we can get it from this glacial shield swipes. I'm not too sure about that. We'll have to find a more efficient way to do it because we can't. Oh, PvP's going. We can't actually run Blood Rage, right? So Blood Rage is a spell. Now endurance charges. So we generate endurance charges from Enduring Cry, and we also generate endurance charges from this node down here called Deflection. So 25% chance to gain endurance charge when you block. And this is a pretty significant node for the build, especially being a Surveillance build. Now, just going back, we have about 61 rage when we tally it up, and this is coming from our Ascendancy and all the various rage nodes that we take. So we literally take like every single rage node that gives us plus rage because we're essentially doing a Hate Forge rage stacker. And then basically we get all the advantages of that too. So we get like minimum power that we generate is up to 5, all the rest of that jazz. Flask active, yes. Consecrated Ground, we've got a Bowl of Faith, so that's what does that. Warcry recent, yes. We have to use Warcries to be able to use this setup, but we'll talk about that soon. Is the enemy close range? Yeah, the enemy's pretty much going to be close range because you're running a slam skill, so that's not really a big issue. Sapped Ground comes from our boots, so we have that crafted in. Now, we could change that to brittle. It'll increase our crit a little bit, and it'll actually give us more damage, but, you know, it's the difference between surviving and not surviving when enemies are on top of you. Intimidate generally will come from the merely physical damage built into the Vaal Ground Slam, which is this here, the Awaken gem. So 10% chance to grant Intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit. And then Consecrated Ground again comes from the Bottle of Faith, and we have Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage on this too. Okay, so now as far as gearing, we sort of briefly touched on this. So we run the Surveillance for max block. This means we got Lucky Block, and we pretty much need that to survive. We run Abyssus to scale up our physical damage. If you notice, there's a Vaal on Corrupted Implicit as well. Gruthkul's Pelt because, you know, YOLO. Facebreakers because, again, YOLO. We have Leviathan Greaves. Now, we're pretty heavily relying on the resistance of this, but we also have implicits such as Sap Ground, which gives us increased damage reduction, and attacks exerted by Seismic Cry deal, you know, percentage increased damage. By the way, I'll add, we have to, like, manually use 4 Warcries because we can't use the auto Warcry gem setup because that is also a spell. We have Ridgewald's Curse, and we have Allocates Claws of the Hawk, which is this node over on the end of the tree. The reason why we have that is it gives us 60% increased crit chance with Claws, and 20% crit multi, which is 1.5 mil of our DPS, because the way that Ridgewald's Curse works is it converts our claw damage to unarmed damage, which is how Facebreaker scales. Steel Rings, you probably want to have Calandra's Touch. Again, you have flat damage for melee, which is going to be hard to get. Crit multi, chaos resistance, life recoup. Ideally, if we can get more life on these rings and regeneration, we can get our regen up to like 2,000 per second and our life pool over 5 to 6,000, and we'll be actually quite tanky. We'll lose a little bit of damage, but we'll be quite tanky. This build is sort of like one of those builds that you play just for the lols, almost. It's like, is it going to take down Ubers? It could potentially take down Ubers if you scale it well enough and you invest in it. It's definitely got the foundation here, right? But it needs a little bit more work. Now, Wraeclast, again, this gives us a big boost to damage. This is corrupted with an attack speed implicit. Bottle of Faith, we got Ruby Flask, Sapphire Flask, Topaz, and Amethyst Flask as well. And all these we probably should have when we generate charges when we deal a crit, so we can keep them up. We probably don't want to be getting hit too much if we can avoid it. So for skill gems, we needed to keep in mind that we can never use a spell skill. Spell skills will not work because of Gruthkul's and the Ascendancy as well. So we use Vaal Ground Slam. We cannot use Ground Slam of Earthbreaking or whatever it is because it requires a two-handed weapon. And so if we could get a level 21, we get 18 million DPS. So basically the goal is to get a level 21. Let's just put it at that because this is a prospective tree. Awaken Brutality, Pulverize, Volatility, Awaken melee physical damage, and overexertion. Obviously, we need to Warcry 4 times to be able to maximize this, but it definitely is, useful. And then we have Seismic Cry in our helmet. We have Urgent Orders, so we get an increased amount of Warcry speed. And we have Seismic Cry, Intimidating Cry, and Rallying Cry. So this just means we can basically cast these really quickly and slam away. We have Shield Charge. Oh, sorry, that's why we have Fortify. I totally forgot about how I set this build up. So we have Shield Charge with faster attacks, Rage on hit as well with our Shield Charge. And we get a global Rage stat of, was that 3 plus 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we get 12 Rage per hit with a 15% probability of getting max Rage. So Shield Charge makes sense with this. It's just going to be the tankiest iteration to go with. And we also generate Fortify by shield charging around as well. You could also use Leap Slam if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. I just use shield charge because I can, but Leap Slam is just as good, probably, if not better, to be honest with you. Now we have just Enduring Cry on its own, and we could use Urgent Orders on that as well, just so we have increased speed. Can't really use anything else in Weapon 2 at this stage, so it is what it is. And Glacial Swipes we have set up in our boots. So we have Glacial Swipes, Ice Bite, Culling Strike, and Expert Retaliation. As you'll notice, I believe we got... Yeah. We don't have anything in the weapon. Oh no, we're pretty geared out here. Yeah, so that's basically it. So yeah, that's basically the setup I've got. Now, do you run Glacial Swipes? I think it works best because of Ice Bite and the chance to freeze, but you can experiment around with this. This is like so far the best way I can find to come up with frenzy charges. And also you got Cull then, which means if you're getting hit, you can drop it. Now damage wise, it's really not going to do much. It does no damage at all, but it is going to trigger Cull. So, is what it is. Yeah, that's basically it for the gem setups. It's surprisingly simple and not very elaborate, which I was actually pleasantly surprised about when I put this together last night. Now, as far as the tree goes, we start with the Marauder, obviously, because that's what a behemoth is. So we come down and we want to grab these like shield nodes down, or this shield node here, Defiance, gives us increased block. Master of the Arena just gives us like every stat that we would possibly need, as well as Art of the Gladiator. Then we're going to come back up. We also want to grab the Deep Breaths, and this is going to give us increased AoE for our war cries, but also 30% recovery rate. Even more than that recovery rate, and then 12%, actually a lot more. That's a 30%, 42% recovery rate, which is pretty significant, right? And so then we'll come across Diamond Skin. This props up our resistances and a bit of regeneration. And the reason why we do this is essentially we really struggle to get resistances up, and this is just an easy way to get around that because we get 5 plus 15, 20, and we get 25% extra all resist from these nodes. So this sort of gets around us using so many uniques in the build. Then we're going to run Measured Fury, so we get an additional exerted attack. And then obviously cooldown recovery rate and increased damage as well. Warcry speed, yeah, you don't really need it because you're running Urgent Orders, so it's irrelevant. And we're running the recover 15% of life when you use a Warcry as well. Then we come through Juggernaut, and we want to pick up Aggressive Bastion. We want to pick up Veteran's Wrath. This is going to give us Inherent Rage Loss starts 1 second later, so we can hold on to our Rage for longer, but also Maximum Rage as well. We don't need to worry about the Inherent Rage Loss. It's 10% slower on this build. We run Blood Mage in this, so we don't need to worry about mana. We just have to build a lot of regeneration. We move up into Bloodless. We come down, we get Bastion Breaker, increased physical damage as well by 10% on the maximum. Dismembering also gives us a ton of crit. And we come down and we get Vengeance, which increases our rage that we generate when we hit the enemy, but also increases our rage by 1% for every, one rage we get of we get 1% armor for every one rage we have. We also want 1% increased movement speed per 5 rage, so we get about 12% rage or 12% movement speed from that as well. Then we get Golem's Blood. We need Versatile Combatant so we can use the best out of Surveillance. And then we want the block chance nodes here. You could also play around with picking up these nodes here, but I don't really see a huge advantage. You get a bit of attack speed, but it's not the best sort of thing to roll. But yeah, I'll leave you guys to figure that out. And then basically we want to come up, we want to get an extra endurance charge as well. So we have 4 endurance charges. Cloth and Chain is pretty significant. If you can find a way to fit in every 4 seconds regenerate life to equal to 1% armor, this is probably useful, but I didn't think it was at the time when I was putting the tree together. And we want to come across and grab Deflection and this 1% chance to block spell damage per 5% chance to block attack damage as well. And that gets us up to 80-80 on our block, so we're like pretty high on the maximum lucky block. We'll talk about clusters last. And then we come back up, we run a Light of Meaning. This basically hits all these nodes and gives us a ton of physical damage at the end of the day. And then basically Barbarism. We want to pick up the crit node Disemboweling, and then the Crit Mastery as well for extra 25% crit multi against unique bosses. And then Battle Trance gives us a flat 10 rage and increased rage on hit as well. Then we're going to come down and we're going to get a Cluster Jewel. So the Cluster Jewel setup I experimented, and the best combination was Battle Harden, Master the Fundamentals, and Force Multiplier. And then we want to have one set up with Cry Wolf and Mob Mentality. And this is also going to give us a chance to get Frenzy Charges and Power Charges. You know, Warcries have a 5% chance to gain. It's not that reliable, but it does mean that if you're popping 4 Warcries on a consistent basis, then essentially you're going to have an uptime of a probability of 20% chance to gain a charge from all of your Warcry, which is pretty useful. Probably not that good. Probably running Onslaught's probably going to be more useful because we don't have Onslaught in the build, and if we did, we get another 1.7 mil DPS, but these are all things that we'll have to play with. And then we obviously have the Behemoth Jewel. If we didn't have this in, we would just run another standard jewel. That'll put us over 20 million DPS, by the way. So this takes up a jewel socket, and you need to keep that in mind. And then basically, Basics of Pain, Pressure Points, and we've just got like a Crimson Jewel with like all the crit nodes, increased life, all the rest of it. And that's basically how we fill in any of our jewel sockets that we haven't got a unique jewel. And in fact, I don't think we have many. We'll have 2, and then we put another one of those in to get 3. Now, Ascendancies on this, we're running Rampager. So we do get Rampage as well. So the benefits of Rampage. Sheer Fury, and Fueled by Hate as well. So Hate Forge and Final Blows. We're basically using everything that shouldn't work together, but apparently does work together, because this Ascendancy is actually a lot better than you think it is when you start to really have a play with it and figure out, hey, actually there's some really cool mechanics that you could get working with this if you're willing to use Facebreaker setups. Anyway, I hope this build is creative enough for people. I do have a Singer build as well for the, was it the Ancestral Commander? And I just basically reworked an old tree that I had, and that actually works pretty well. So if you guys want to see it, I might do it. I don't know if I want to do that video tonight or tomorrow night, but yeah, that's also a pretty cool build as well. You can't auto cast it anymore because the cost is too high, but you can just walk around hitting, whatever your hit button is, and then just do a Warcry and kill everything. When I played it last time, and it was a lot less powerful, it was able to do T17 maps pretty easily, and the big advantage now is actually because of the Ascendancy, you can now explode corpses. It means that you'll just nuke entire screens, theoretically. But yeah, we might actually do that video after this video, and we'll put that up tonight too, because it'd be pretty cool. Anyway, if you like this video, and yeah, you think the build is cool, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. This is not a League Starter build, by the way, and I have no idea of how this sustains. I am tempted to play this. In fact, I really want to play this because it's so cool and different, and would make a really good video to see how it would work, or a fail video to go, hey, it didn't work. But this is just something from playing around to see if we can get it to work. I sort of now want to make the build. I'm definitely going to play Bone Shatter, but, you know, I'm having a lot of fun theory crafting at the moment because there's just so many crazy combinations that'll work with Path of Exile 1 right now that it just makes no damn sense. But it's really cool. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys later, and have a good one.